Welcome back to How to Craft Fair. This is episode number 10 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Vendor series. So today's episode is going to revolve around pricing your items at a craft fair. And I've jam-packed this video with as many tips as I possibly can, so hang with me until the end, and I hope that this will help you at your next show. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so before we kind of get into the really detailed stuff, I first want to say that you should have every item at your booth marked with a price. It should be very, very clear to all shoppers what your items cost. And there's basically two different avenues that you can go with this. You can price every single item individually with a tag on each item at your booth, or you can group like items together and then have a sign near those similar items that covers the pricing for each of those, groups of items. Again, there's two different ways that you can kind of approach it. By having a tag on every single item, it is a little bit more maintenance involved because, throughout the day, if you're selling items and your booth is doing well, then you have to put a tag on every single item that you're replacing at your booth throughout the day. Whereas if you have a sign with grouped items that are kind of just in a bunch together, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that maintenance throughout the day, and you can just kind of replace your stock at your table or your booth as the day goes on, and you don't have to worry about that pricing element. So there's really no right or wrong way with doing this. It's really just kind of personal preference. Some people like the tag on every item, and some people like just to have the sign for the items. But I would pick one or the other because you want to absolutely be sure that when somebody approaches your booth that they don't have to ask you what something costs. And this will just make it very easy and clear on the shopper. All right, so with that being said, what method are you using to price your items? Hopefully you're doing one of these two things already, but comment below which method you use and why you prefer that method. Okay, so now let's start to break down what to price things for. Okay, like literally how much you would price your items. And the first step in figuring this out is you want to have an idea of the specific cost of the raw materials for what you've crafted and created. So that is your absolute base cost, okay? Obviously your price needs to be above that, but by figuring this out for each item that you have at your booth, you can start to kind of have a baseline of where you need to be pricing to get above that raw material cost. All right, now the next thing I want you to consider is your value as an artisan or a maker. So think about all the experience it took to build up to get to this point where you've crafted this item that you're about to price. Odds are you didn't just pick this design up one day and make it and it's perfect and ready to showcase at your booth. It took a lot of effort. It took trial and error. So some of this weighs into how you price your item. It's not just the cost of the raw materials, it's your time and the effort that you put into crafting this item in itself. Also factor in just literally the time that it took to make this particular item, not the experience that led up to it, but did this take an hour to make? Did it take 3 hours to make this item? So that is kind of like a recipe there that you have to, it's more of a feel thing rather than the raw numbers from the raw materials that we talked about. This is kind of like more of like a gut feeling thing. And as you start to price your items higher up off that raw material cost, this is something that you can start to kind of weigh into consideration on, okay, how much higher above the raw material cost do I start to go? So take that into consideration when you start to price your items. Okay, so now the next element that we're going to talk about is the demand for this particular item. So this can vary greatly even within one artist's booth, okay? So a lot of times what vendors will do is they'll have maybe a few different types of items that are kind of like their heavy hitters, their best sellers, that they know they have a track record of selling well at shows. Then at their booth, they have, maybe they're mixing in some new designs, some new items that either don't have like a lengthy track record and they're new, or maybe it's kind of just, the ones that don't sell quite as well. So factor in the demand for your items when you price them as well. If you have items that are selling like you can't even keep up with inventory, maybe consider, bumping the price up just a touch, just to kind of, balance out that demand and supply. Some vendors might not want to, raise prices once they kind of have like an established item that's selling. So again, that's, your choice to make, but it is something to consider. If you can make a little bit more profit and still sell just as much, well, it's worth at least considering. Okay, so if you're familiar with the channel, you know that I have a series of booth reviews where I assess what vendors are doing well with their booth and then also identify areas of improvement. One of the things that I talk about in those videos every single time is price points. So you want to have a variety of price points at your booth. That means that you're offering lower priced items, and then medium priced items, and then also you want to have some higher priced items at your booth. You basically want to be covering all three of those tiers so that no matter what shopper approaches your booth, you pretty much have something for everybody, and no matter what their budget is, you've got something for them. So that's definitely one thing to consider with pricing your items, is you want to kind of have all three of those levels covered at your booth. So this can actually be taken into consideration even when you're designing your items or you're getting ready to build up inventory and things like that. You should be thinking far ahead and what your booth is going to look like and how balanced it's going to be with your different price points. So keep that in mind, not just as you're preparing to get ready for a fair, but even as you're preparing your inventory itself. Okay, now we're going to take a moment to touch on bundle pricing. So bundle pricing is something I talk a lot about on the channel, but we're going to hit it again because we're talking about pricing. Okay, so bundle pricing, there's basically two different ways that you can do it. And before we dive into that, I'll kind of explain what bundle pricing is. So it's basically a discount that incentivizes multiple transactions, like multiple items being sold to one person. Okay, so instead of just selling one item to each shopper, it's a way to try to trigger one shopper buying multiple things at your booth. Now, there's basically two different ways that you can do it. The first way is to have a high priced item. Okay, so we talked about that, higher tier before. If you have a higher tier where you're trying to get, people to buy those more expensive items at your booth, one of the things that you can do is pair a higher tier item with a very low tier item and offer that as a freebie when people buy an expensive item. So just to make it simple, we're going to talk about painters, okay? Let's assume that a painter has like a large 16 by 20 canvas that's like $100 at their booth. But then they also offer up like little 4" by 4" square paintings that are maybe like $10 or $5. What the artist could do then is say, okay, shoppers, if you buy this big $100 painting, I'll let you pick any of my $10 paintings as a freebie and thank you for buying, the big high ticket item. So that is like your first bundle pricing opportunity, is to pair a very high priced item with your lowest tier item and then give those out as a freebie. Now, the second way that you can do it, and probably the more common way that people will do this at craft fairs, is they'll just give a discount when people buy more than one item of like the same value. Okay, so let's say you have somebody that makes candles, and one candle would normally cost $15. But then they have a sale where if you buy two, instead of $30, it's $25, and you would get $5 off for buying at least two candles. So that's the second way that you can do bundle pricing, is to give a monetary incentive for buying more than one item. Now, bundle pricing is a great tool to use at your booth, but the most important thing that you need to keep in mind with it when you're setting your prices is you need to set your prices high enough so that when people take advantage of these types of discounts, that you already have that buffer in place so that you're protecting your profits. You don't want to get yourself into a situation where, you've kind of priced your stuff so cheaply or reasonably in the shopper's point of view, that when people take advantage of these discounts, that you're actually like losing money now. So just keep that into consideration, that you want to protect your profit line. So if you're going to do bundle pricing at your booth, you kind of have to like raise your prices up across the board a little bit, so that when people take advantage of discounts, it's pretty much falling down to your expected profit margin that you've set to begin with. Okay, so for this next tip, let's just assume that you're rolling out a new item and you have no idea what to price it as. Now, what you can do is compare that item to other vendors. So either at a show that you're participating at, or go and visit some shows and try to find a vendor that makes something similar to this item that you're unsure about, and see what they have their item priced for, okay? So find the vendor, make sure that it's something similar to yours, see what theirs is priced for, and watch the booth a little bit too. You know, if shoppers are coming by and they're picking the item up and they have interest in it, or maybe maybe there's some transactions happening, things like that, you can pretty much now reliably assume that that price is a fair price and people are interested in it at that price. But also, one thing to look at in this scenario or situation is to observe the quality of their item. So how does the quality of your item compare to the quality of theirs? And if your quality is higher, and you can't be biased, just because it's yours, right? So just be fair about it, unbiased. Look at the item, see how it kind of stacks up against yours, and then look at their price point, and then kind of get an idea of like where you're headed with the price on this item. Now, again, like I never, recommend vendors to, copy things that other vendors are doing or anything like that, but this is just kind of like a last resort situation where if you truly have no idea how much, you should kind of price something for, this is one tool that you can use just by comparison and observing, and it'll at least get you in the ballpark and get yourself started with where your prices should be. All right, so I want to take a moment to talk about my Etsy shop. Now, I know this is kind of coming out of left field in this video, but I am rolling out a new item on my Etsy shop that is going to be a great tool for craft fair vendors to use. So it is a craft fair sales sheet. And the way that it's designed is at the very top, it has like your basic information, like the event location, the event date, the attendance of the event. And then it has a big area in the middle where you can write the quantity of your items that have sold, and then the item description, and then for how much they sold for. The reason why I'm mentioning this in a pricing video is that you should be bringing this to every single craft fair that you attend. And it's great to look back on in the short term as far as like, okay, I have to replace this much inventory and build this stock back up and things like that. But it is also great for the long term if you're a craft fair vendor, because you can start to look at this and identify trends. And there's a notes section on the bottom of this sheet where I would highly recommend that you use this section for demographic purposes. So what kinds of people are buying your items? Are they mostly female, mostly male? Are they younger? Are they older? Like, use these demographics to start to record who is connecting with your items the most, because in turn, let's say you do this for an entire craft fair season. So let's say you do just events between the spring and the fall. So you go through your spring, your summer, and your fall shows, and then you kind of get into your off season. Pull all these sheets out and look at every transaction that you've done, and then look at the demographics of who has purchased from your booth. Now, when you're in your off season, you can take this information and start to plan out next year's events and be like, okay, I know that I, sell to young people pretty well. So I want to be kind of like in an urban or trendier part of town where I know that there's going to be like a younger audience. Or if you, tend to sell to maybe some older people, maybe you should just stick to shows like that are out in the suburbs or quieter parts of town where, there's probably a bit of an older audience involved. So this is a way that you can use your pricing and your sales at a craft fair to actually improve and better your odds of putting your items in front of the audiences that are more likely to buy from what you're selling and presenting. All right, so that was episode number 10 in the How to Become a Craft Fair Vendor series. I can't believe we're already halfway through. If you want to check out all the other videos in this playlist, click on the playlist above, and that'll take you to all the episodes. And as always, I want to take a moment to thank everybody that's watching and thank everybody that has watched the How to Become a Craft Vendor series. It's been a pleasure to make this, and I'm looking forward to the second half of the series. Please be sure to like and subscribe and tell a friend. Have a great day.